Okay. So welcome everybody. This is our last meeting of the year before we have SQL Saturday, which is in how many days, Mike? Come on, one job, one thing I asked you to do.
You didn't ask me a damn thing. It's.
We're roughly
29 days.
less than a month away from SQL Saturday. So if you have not registered for SQL Saturday, Portland, Vancouver, now is the time to get that done. Add it to your checklist because that is coming really quick. And SQL Saturday, what we're going to have.
We're gonna have, let's see, and to answer the question I saw pop up, I think right now there's 11 people in the room, and I think we have more. We are going to have 45 unique speakers, 50 speakers, 45 sessions. Plus we've got a couple more in the wings too, so we'll have to see. We're gonna have an awesome keynote. We're gonna have taco lunch, free lunch, from a place up in Battleground. Should be a lot of fun. We'll have raffle prizes too. So it's gonna be at Clark College in Vancouver.
And cake.
And you're right, one piece.
Mike, make
One piece.
sure
One piece.
we are all getting cake.
No, that case, that's mine.
We
You gave me
are
so much
going
crap
to
about that.
split it
I'm just gonna eat
with
the cake.
all of you. So yeah.
But yeah, if you do a search for SQL Saturday, Oregon, you should be able to find it. Go to the website. The schedule is definitely posted. Again, it's free. It's on Saturday. Just register. You register through Eventbrite.
Yes, and you can also, if you're linked to any of us on LinkedIn, you can go to our feed and find links to register for
Right.
SQL Saturday there as well.
And no, there's not going to be a virtual option for SQL Saturday. You have to show up in person.
Yes, it's in person.
You can't get any tacos otherwise.
That's right.
Hey, really, you have to understand that it's maybe it's a little bit of a trick, but we truly have an international community coming to this because we have people coming from almost every continent in the world who are going to be speaking at this event. So this is an opportunity to really meet speakers from all over.
And they're some of the finest because after they hit our SQL Saturday, they head up to PASS in Seattle. So a lot of these people are going to be the presenters at PASS as well. So we kind of get a front row seat as to a much larger event that's just happening days after our event. So, yeah. So, and one of the things too, thank you all for attending. Community is so important. And I wanted to take a moment specifically to thank Omnidata. They are our new sponsors. They are sponsoring the food that we're able to share with all of the people attending in person.
Mm-hmm.
And they also are our marquee sponsor for SQL Saturday.
They are,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to be.
So, and they're offering a lot of volunteers. They are really stepping up this year and doing a lot to help our community. You know, we can't do this without sponsorship. So we want to, really take a moment to thank them for that. And we do have a representative here from Omnidata. Do you want to take a minute to talk about your company and introduce yourself?
Come on up.
Come on up to where the camera is.
I'll just take 10 seconds.
Uh-huh.
Hello everyone. To talk about much about Omnidata, we are a small firm at this moment, but we are growing very drastically. We have been implementing a lot of wide variety of solutions across Azure platforms, migrations, and also implementing whatever is cutting edge over there. We are trying to implement and get and be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Are there any job openings at Omnidata right now that you'd like to speak to? Please.
There are. So usually there is an opening for Azure data engineers and Power BI specialists. If anyone of you is interested, please send out the resumes and we'll forward them.
Is there a Power Apps or?
Yes, and there is also a Power Apps associate. That's also an opening for it. So if anyone is interested, do send out the resumes for Power Apps, Power BI, and also Azure data engineers at the moment.
Yes, and if anybody's interested in this room, please feel free afterwards to talk to. But
Bhargava, I'm Bhargava Chitty. I'm one of the architects at Omnidata.
yes.
Perfect.
And if you're online and you're also interested in any of these roles and looking for more information, you can either go to the Omnidata website, or you can put your name in the chat and we will connect you to Barbara.
Yeah, Bhargava. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. So, and thank you again for the support from Omnidata. It's really critical for, like I said, our ability to put on these monthly meetings. So
Yeah, and we are happy to be a part of it.
thank you. Thank you so much.
And speaking of the monthly meetings, though, we do have a full lineup plan for 2024.
Mhm.
So we're definitely going to keep on be doing this here, in this room, as far as I know. Do we?
Well, we do need to renew our,
Okay, so we need to renew it. So we're going to stay in Vancouver, and it's going to be a wide variety of speakers. We're going to have some local speakers. We've got a couple people who are actually going to fly out here, like I know Grant Pitchy, who's going to come out here from the Northeast. So he said he promised he would fly over here and speak in person. So that should be pretty cool. We might be able to get someone, Adam Saxton. He also said something, but he had had a few shots of Jägermeister. Yeah.
we're still
exactly.
holding into it.
Yeah, whatever works. And of course, we've got our great local speakers too. So it should be a fun time. We're gonna, and also this is the last month meeting of the year because we have Sickle Saturday on November. And then December, we tried that once and no one showed up. So anyway, everyone enjoy December, have a good time. But we will be back in January and we'll be posting it on the website and all the usual communications. So, thank you.
Any other announcements? Oh, should we ask him, is there? Yeah,
And what?
ask about jobs or job.
Right. Well, yeah, again, yeah, I put it in the
So-
chat and you can always send an email to leadership@oregonsequel.org. That's going to get all four of us right here.
Mhm.
So we'll be sure to get it to the right place.
Yeah, no, and actually, I want to also take a moment to thank our leadership for being here tonight. We have Paul Turley, we have William Aguilar.
Yep,
We have
take a
Mike-
bow.
Yes, you are.
Yes, go the laptop over here.
So we are the Oregon Data Community Dream Team. So
Mhm.
pulling it off for, I think, coming
Dream
up
team
on
is in the house.
4 years.
Yeah.
So
through COVID.
yes, we made it through COVID, made it through as a team. So, again, want to thank all the leadership for Oregon Data Community for showing up and, helping to make this thing happen, keeping this event going and keeping our Sequel Saturdays. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah.
So with that, do we want to introduce our speaker?
Yeah,
Back to you.
Paul.
Or-
Yes, I'm volunteering to introduce Stephanie. Hello, Stephanie. Thank you so much for volunteering to speak tonight. So I will introduce Stephanie by just sharing a story very quickly about how we met. This was, I don't know, like 6 years ago, I think. So I was back when I was traveling and doing Dashboard in a Day road shows around the country. I believe it was in Pittsburgh that I did a day-long presentation and training class at the Microsoft office in Pittsburgh and met Stephanie. She was helping organize the user group meeting that happened to be meeting that evening, and had an opportunity to meet Stephanie, and her energy was just infectious. And Stephanie at the time was working for a charitable organization, helping kids throughout the world deal with AIDS pandemic and providing health care, and just a great cause, and had a great story to tell around that. And she actually was very instrumental in getting a number of people from the Microsoft Power BI product teams to go over to Africa to volunteer their time and teach people how to use data to be able to further their cause. It was just such an impressive thing, and Stephanie was behind that. Stephanie, I don't know how long you've been at Microsoft now. How long
So
has it
I'm
been?
not at Microsoft anymore. I'm actually at a partner now. So I'm at
Oh,
iLink Digital. Right. Yeah. So I was at Microsoft for a couple of years, but now I'm at a partner.
Yeah, we need to. The problem with our audio is that when I speak, it echoes, and then we couldn't hear Stephanie. So anyway, so Stephanie joined Microsoft for a number of years. She and I have been on the road. We've run into each other at different conferences and things together, where she presents on things like she's going to talk about tonight. And if you haven't visited the Data Witches website, you'll find some wonderful insights there. But with that, Stephanie, I'll go ahead and turn the time over to you, and thank you once again sharing your time and your insights with our user group.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Is sound okay?
you know what? I think that since Mike, changed it, hold on just a second. It's on my laptop. I need to switch my speaker device. Just a minute.
Testing.
All right, let's try to do that.
Okay, how's this?
Awesome.
Better? I feel like I hear myself a little, but let's go with it. Okay, should I go? I'm gonna start, unless somebody stops me. Okay, all right.
We're good, Stephanie. I have to mute my mic, otherwise there'll be some
Okay.
feedback here in the room. Just know that we have about a 1-second delay, but that shouldn't affect this.
I'll try to talk slow, I guess. Okay. So first, thank you, Paul, for that really nice introduction. Yes, that is where we met at the Pittsburgh Microsoft office, and I will never forget that you showed me how to combine files in Power Query, and my jaw dropped. I just still remember that. And you had that fabulous UFO data set, which I still have stolen from you to this day. I use that one. So thank you, Paul. And it's really nice to see you again. And thank you also very much for having me here tonight. I wish I was in person. It sounds like a really great group that you have there. But I'm very grateful to be here, at least remotely. So tonight we will talk about direct lake mode in Power BI. And I think you can see my screen, but let me just, okay, I'm having trouble moving things, but here we go. Okay, so agenda, I'll introduce myself, and you may have noticed a special guest up on the top. She's also sharing her screen. I'll introduce her too. We'll talk about Fabric briefly. I noticed that Paul did do a presentation on Fabric to this group maybe in the spring, but we'll just go over it really quickly. And then specifically, we'll talk about how Power BI connects to data. Maybe we'll do a little poll to see how many people are using Power BI right now. We'll focus on import and direct query modes. Then we'll have a fun story time and demo to make sure everybody's awake. And then we can talk specifically about direct lake mode and how you can get started with this magic. So, introductions. Okay, so there's a picture of two of us here, but I am Stephanie on the left. I'm a BI architect at iLink. Yes, I was at Microsoft for a while, for a couple of years, but now I'm working at a partner. I really wanted to try out the whole spectrum here. I'm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and my job at iLink is I am a BI architect, but also the Fabric champion. So I'm jumping in head first with Fabric and working on Fabric POCs with customers. So I'm getting to learn a lot about Fabric really quickly. I also have my co-witch here. She's a special guest, Shannon Lindsay. She's above, and she's also got her camera on. Welcome, Shannon. She is a content developer at Microsoft. So when you do a lot of those learning paths on Fabric and Power BI, you have Shannon to thank for it. And fun story, Paul, thank you for remembering that I was at this nonprofit when we met. That's actually also where I met Shannon. We were working there together. And, you know, I liked to spread the gospel of Power BI wherever I went, but Shannon really took me up on it. And so, you know, it kind of shifted her career, and now she's at Microsoft. So welcome, Shannon. She's based in Santa Fe. And any questions about certifications, learning, Shannon is who you can ask.
Thank
Sorry,
you
I
so
just
much.
saw a quick question in the chat. Okay, yes, you can see my screen okay, right?
I can see it.
Okay. Welcome, Shannon. Did you want to do a quick intro?
Oh, I just wanted to say hi and thanks for the welcome. I will be spamming the chat with links and just trying to interact with people as much as possible. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, yes, so ask any questions in the chat. Shannon will keep an eye on that. And she's also here for comic relief. So get ready for some Shannon fun. All right, so with that, let's just jump right into our first agenda item, which is fabric. So I know that Paul did do a whole session on that, but maybe some of you weren't there. So I want to make sure that everybody has at least a brief overview of what is this new fabric thing that was announced in May at Build? Yeah, at Build. Okay, so Fabric is a software as a service platform. It really brings together all of the analytics workloads that Microsoft has, plus some new, and plus everything is enhanced. So within Fabric, you have Data Factory and data engineering, data science, data warehousing, real-time analytics, Power BI, and Data Activator. We're not going to go into Data Activator tonight. We're going to focus on Power BI. But what it gives you is this single onboarding and trials, single sign-on, single navigation, all of these things in one place. It's AI assisted. I'm sure maybe some of you have seen the big to-do about Copilot. That's really the icing on the cake. It's awesome, but there's a lot more to Fabric than Copilot. We have shared workspaces. So if you're already used to Power BI, you kind of have an advantage because then you're going to be really comfortable with Fabric. If you're not used to Power BI, it's still an easy entry point here. It's got universal compute capacities. I kind of think of this as the licensing. So now instead of having to pay for all of these different products separately, you pay for a capacity and you get all the workloads within one place. There's one security built in. This is kind of coming soon. This part is still in more preview than the actual preview. And then finally, everything is based on OneLake. So we'll go into that more in the next slide. But think of Fabric as kind of your all-in-one Microsoft Analytics product. So instead of having to spin up different resources all over the place, you have one place to go. So I mentioned the OneLake. So OneLake is kind of being billed as the OneDrive for data. So it's one copy of data. It's one lake for your entire tenant, and everything stores the data in the OneLake. And I will demo this a little bit later, but it's a really important concept with Fabric because everything is stored in this OneLake. So just like in the old days, we used to email around multiple copies of Word documents, and they would all get out of sync, and then everything would become a mess. You know, we solved that problem with OneDrive. So this is exactly what OneLake is. So now instead of having copies of our data all over the place and data silos, and then we move it here and we transform it, the idea here is that we have it in one place and we have one copy for it. It's also stored in a single common format. So for all the tabular data in Fabric, it's stored in the Delta format. It says Delta Parquet here, but really it's the Delta format, but it is Parquet files. It's also an open standards format. So when you have your data in the OneLake in this tabular format, it's not limited to the Microsoft tools. So if you want to use other tools with it, it is an open standards format. So that's pretty huge. It's accessible by all of the engines. So every engine within Fabric uses this single format. So the Spark engine, it can save your data, you know, the customer data in the OneLake. T-SQL engine, save your data also in the OneLake. So even when you're writing a T-SQL query, you're actually writing it against these Parquet files, but it feels like the comfortable environment that you're used to. And then finally, there is going to be this universal security model on top of it, but this is more coming soon. And, you know, quick side note, remember that everything I'm going to show you is in preview. So if we do have any bugs, we're going to blame it on that. So this is your quick overview of, you know, what is Fabric. There's a lot more to learn, and I'm just going to kind of mention Shannon's learning paths again. These are really good. So go to the learning paths on Microsoft and you can take some great tutorials and learn all about an overview of Fabric. But tonight we're specifically talking about direct lake mode. So let's get into that. Okay. So how does Power BI connect to data? It connects, to data sources using connectors, and you're either importing data or you're connecting directly. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail. When you connect to it, you shape it with Power Query / data flows, and then your visuals query the data sets using DAX. So either whatever format it's in, this is how we generally are used to querying it. Today, I'm going to call this in the before time. So actually not today, yesterday, in the yesterdays, we had two main methods of connecting to data in Power BI. One was import mode and one was direct query. Now I think Shannon tried to put a quick poll in here about, it would be great if we knew how many people here are using Power BI, because I want to make sure that I'm focusing this on what you need. But I'm going to assume you're already using Power BI. Feel free to ask a question if you need more info. But
we got one thumbs up on the poll. So
we've got
at least one person.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Okay. So again, before today, our main methods of connecting to data were import or direct query. So import mode, it is latent and duplicative because we have to import it into a Power BI data set. So as soon as we import it into that data set, it's cut off from the source. So it can get stale. And then we've also got two copies. If you notice, we have a copy of the tables in the data set. So if our source data is in SQL, and then we import it into a data set, we have two copies of this data. But it's fast because it's in this format that Power BI can read really quickly with the DAX queries. So as your users are interacting with their visuals, those queries going against that imported data are really fast. So we love that, right? But sometimes we might need more real-time data, or maybe we have a huge data set that's too big to pull in import mode. So in those cases, we can use direct query. So we don't have those copies of the data anymore, and our Power BI data set is really just metadata. However, it can be slow. This is because as your users are interacting with the report, those DAX queries that get created, thank you, Paul, very much for that number. As those DAX queries get created, they then have to be translated into SQL queries of whatever flavor of SQL the source data is in. So if those queries come back slow, there's nothing Power BI can do about it. So for direct query, you really have to have a lot of expertise to make it work effectively. Generally, we recommend whenever possible use import because direct query, it just has some limitations. It can be a real challenge. So let's just quickly go over again the details of import versus direct query. So with import, the data is stored in the Power BI dataset. It's generally the first choice for performance and simplicity. It's for data that doesn't have to be real time. However, as the data grows, those refreshes can start to get slow and you have to do clever tricks with partitions or incremental refresh, composite models. I'm sure we have all been there where, we have a great data set and then all of a sudden the data gets big and the refreshes start taking too long and it's really challenging to deal with. We still try to do it, right? Because import is the way to go, but it can get difficult. And again, it's creating a new copy of the data, but so it's duplicative, but it is fast. So we do like to do this whenever we can. But when we can't, then we have to do direct query. So this is where it connects directly to that data source, and Power BI sends the queries real time, but it is a challenge, and I think it does require a lot of expertise. If you try to use it, you can run into some issues. So what do? We try to find the best of both worlds, but we haven't found it yet. And with that, it's time for a little story. So just in case anybody started to fall asleep, it's story time. And we're welcoming our special guest, Shannon, here for that.
And my dog.
And her dog. Okay, so we're going to put on a couple different hats here. Shannon is my boss. I am her BI analyst, engineer, everything. And she needs some reports.
Hey, Stephanie, I have a ton of data I don't know what to do with it, but I know that I need a Power BI report. Can you help me out with that?
Okay, you say a ton of data. I'm gonna still try import mode because that's gonna be my first tactic here. Sorry, Paul just said there's some glitchy audio in the room. Can anybody put in the chat online if things are okay or bad? Just gonna pause quickly. We can restart the story.
I think the barking dog might be ruining it.
Okay, we have an online. Lee says that it's fine online. Do you want to pause, Paul, for a second? See if we can get that fixed, or should I go ahead? All right, everybody says online is good. Well, maybe just put in the chat whatever you want us to do.
Yeah, I think our slow connection is here in the room. I did a test on my phone. It's super fast, but audio is just, we're getting a little more than 50%. We're going to set up another hotspot. Stephanie, keep going. And we'll switch our connection when we're ready here. So I don't think we need to delay.
Okay. Well, I don't want you to miss story time, but all right. Yeah. We can pause for a minute if that would help.
Why don't we pause for a minute and I'll just switch to another hotspot and see if that fixes our problem.
Okay, let's give it 1 minute. I can get a sip of water.
That sounds good.
My dog has a lot to say about this topic. Whoever tells a direct query joke wins some kind of a prize.
All right, I think we may have solved the problem here in the room. So we started having problems about 2 minutes ago before we paused. 2 or 3 minutes.
We're good now? Okay, we're gonna go.
I think we're good now.
Okay, so my boss, Shannon, is gonna repeat her request.
All right, so Stephanie, I hear you're a pretty good analyst, but I've got an issue and I need your help. I have some data. I need to analyze it. I need to see it. I need it in a Power BI report, and I need it now or like yesterday. Can you do that for me?
Okay, definitely. Sure. Okay, so you have a few data sources. It looks totally manageable. I'm going to write some Power Query. I'm going to do an import. I'm going to have a data set. And then I am going to give it to you in a number of reports. So here they are. How do they look?
Oh, well, you made that look really easy. I love it.
No problem.
And I love it. And the team needs to be able to do more analysis. We need to be able to do something with the data. We're going to need to export it to Excel.
Hey now. We do not export to Excel around here. You know better. We've talked about this before. No, you can connect your data to Excel, or you can connect your Excel file to the data set directly. You can do analyze in Excel. Side note, my boss doesn't know that my data is bigger than I realized, and it takes an hour to refresh. But it doesn't matter because it's just a daily refresh, no big deal. Shh, don't tell her.
Okay, so that's sort of helpful. Excel is helpful, but my analysts need to be able to do more exploration. They need to be able to query the data. What can you offer me?
Psst, no problem. They can query the data with DAX. All they have to do is learn DAX, and they can use DAX Studio for that, right? Easy peasy. Okay. I realize that's unacceptable.
No. We don't all want to use DAX Studio. I want my analysts to be able to write SQL. And then, you know,
SQL.
what about the data scientists?
Wait, what?
Data scientists,
Well,
they need to work on this too.
they can write DAX, right? Oh, okay. Okay. All right. We could try direct query, but then we need to build out a full-on data warehouse outside of Power BI. The report performance might be a little slow because I'm not an expert on data warehousing. How's that sound? Do you want to hire a data engineer?
You know, I was thinking we could take that out of your salary, the budget for the data warehouse.
Okay. I clearly need to find a new solution here because I would like to keep my paycheck. Okay. You know what we're going to do? I heard about this thing called Fabric. Well, let me
Are
tell
we
you about
making a
that.
quilt? Making a quilt?
No, we are not. Okay, I think I think direct lake mode in Fabric is going to solve all of my problems. So, number one, I did hide the fact from my boss that the refresh takes an hour. And I did hear from her eventually that she wanted to refresh it every 30 minutes. That was going to be a real big problem. So, my imported data set would not be feasible. However, I think if I put it into the lake house, which is here in the middle, I actually don't need to refresh my data set. That's kind of amazing. I get that benefit of direct lake, but I've also heard that it's fast. I also
Can I
get
pause
some,
you? Can I pause you for a minute?
yeah,
What is a lake house?
oh, well, good question. Okay, so within Fabric, I can build a data warehouse or a lake house. Currently in the preview, direct lake mode only is supported in the lake house, not the warehouse. That's why I've decided to do that because this is an urgent requirement that my pay doesn't get cut. So we're going to do a lake house here. So as long as I put my data in the lake house, I actually can still query it as though it's in a warehouse, which I'll show you. All right, thank you for that question. So I think this also solves the problem because once the data is in the lakehouse, I get that speed of import so I can keep having those Power BI reports and I can connect with Excel. I can still do DAX Studio, but I'm not going to require everybody to learn DAX. And my engineers can query it with SQL. The data scientists can they can use a notebook and write some Python if they would like to query it in whatever format they like. So I'm thinking we should try direct lake mode in Power BI. What do you think, boss?
This is sounding like a good option. Can you show me more?
Yes. Can you recap it for me, actually? I would
Well,
like to make sure that you understand what I've told you.
okay, let's see if I truly understand this. So the first thing that you mentioned is the universal option import mode is fabulous. It's fast, but we're creating another copy of the tables. Is that right?
That's true.
Okay,
Right.
so then
And
you
we can't
mentioned,
query with SQL, so
right, which I need.
which you
So
need.
that's not going to work. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So then the next option you mentioned is direct query, but this to me sounded way too complicated. And that's all I heard was that it's complicated.
It's complicated for me, that's for sure. And slow.
And a little slow. Okay. And then finally, we have our solution, right? Which is going to be direct lake mode.
Indeed.
And this means that there is not another copy of the data being made, that the report is just querying the lake directly.
Correct.
Can that be true?
It is true.
Okay.
And it's not slow. This is because Power BI has now been optimized to read those Delta files nearly as quickly as an import mode. Right? This is why we have a little bit of fire on here, some witches, because we got some magic going on. This is where the magic comes for sure. So, quick recap of direct lake mode. One, Power BI is optimized to query these lakehouse tables fast or whenever they bring it to the warehouse because they're all built on that same Parquet or Delta Parquet format. My bad, Delta format. It will be very, very, very fast. Two, you don't have to do a data set refresh. Of course, you still have to make sure your data in the lakehouse or the warehouse is up to date, but you do not need to do a Power BI data set refresh. And 3, you get a lot more options for querying those tables. Whereas in the past, we could not write SQL queries against a Power BI dataset table. We can write SQL queries against a Lakehouse table. What do you think, boss? Sound good?
It's still sounding good to me, but I'm going to need to see it.
Oh, well, guess what? We can do a demo. Let's do a demo of Direct Lake for the win.
Ah,
And this is where we have to do our sacrificing chickens or something to the demo goddesses so that everything works. And I do have to do a preface that the product is still in preview. So if something is broken, that is why. So let me just switch over what I'm sharing to my browser to the live demo day. Okay, so here it is. So can you see my?
we can see your browser. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so if you have used Power BI before, this should look very, very familiar. This is just the home screen here. And when I go into this, let me jump into a workspace that I have the Fabric trial capacity set up in. And of course, it's called the Witching Hour workspace, obviously. So within this workspace, I think the first thing that you will notice is that we now have a lot more types of objects. Whereas before we pretty much had reports, data sets, maybe some data flows. Now there's a whole lot more going on in here. Reports and data sets. We also have a SQL endpoint, Lakehouse, data flow Gen 2 down here. We've got a warehouse, we've got notebooks, all kinds of fun things. And so it becomes more important than ever that we look at the lineage view of things because this is how we can see how everything is connected. So for example here, we have 2 reports right here that are using this data set, which is named Indirect Lake Mode, which is based on this SQL endpoint, which is based on this Lakehouse. So let's just look at this a little bit more. First thing I want to show you is a sample report. So I have one right here, again, called Indirect Lake Mode. This is how I remember. So this report right here, this is based on some Washington, D.C. Capitol bike share data. This data is all just about how many bike rides people take, what kind of bikes they're on, where they start and end. But it's pretty basic data. However, it is in Direct Lake Mode. So if you've used Direct Query before, you've probably noticed that when you click on something and you do those interactive activities, it can be pretty slow. But with Direct Lake Mode, it is generally a lot faster. I think it needed to be cached. This is where the demo goddesses have not received their chicken sacrifice, Shannon. So anyway, once we start clicking around, it'll be a lot faster. It just needed to warm itself up. But now you've noticed once I click it and we really get going, things are pretty speedy. But what I wanted to show you is make sure that you take note of the data that we're looking at. Right now we have about 3.4 million rides, and we're looking at data from July of 2022. But if we go back to the workspace, the last thing I wanted to point out about how I just kind of wanted to prove to you that we're not importing data. So if I go into the workspace settings and we look at the system storage, we can see that I have a couple data sets here that are very, very small. That's because these are those metadata only data sets. I have a few other ones in here where I'm importing, but the one that I'm working on right here in Direct Lake Mode, it's only 1 megabyte. It's really just the metadata. There is no actual data being stored in here. So that's like Direct Lake. So how do we do this? How do we get our data in? So the first thing that I have done is I've created a lakehouse. And if you want to go into a Fabric trial and do this too, to create a lakehouse is very simple. You can go to this new dropdown, and you might notice there's not a lakehouse in here. That's because I'm in the Power BI experience. But if I click more options, then I can see everything that's available to me. So if I did want to create a new lakehouse, I just click on Lakehouse, I give it a name, and boom, I will have a lakehouse. That's it. I don't have to configure anything else. Well, let's just go back to the workspace and let's look at the one that I've created. So this one is called Bike Rides. When you create a new lakehouse, you will automatically get a tables folder, and a files folder. The tables, these are called the managed tables. And if you look and you see this tiny little black triangle, at first when I saw it, I thought it was an error, but it's not. It's the delta. So this is telling us that it's in that delta format, and so we can use it for direct lake mode. In files, you can put whatever you want. So I have created a few subfolders here for my little processing of my data, but you can put anything you want in here. So if you click the dots, you can upload files or a folder. You can create new subfolders. There's also this concept of shortcuts that we're not going to get into tonight, but you can also shortcut to some other data. So this is how we don't make copies of data, for example. So in my case here, I just have some folders. If I did want to upload some data, I could do that through here. I can also turn some files from here into these managed tables. They make it very, very easy. So you can see in my temp folder here, I've got a number of CSVs. If I wanted to convert these to managed tables, these three dots here, I can just say load to tables, and I can do that. That's kind of a manual process. So of course, we would like to automate things a little bit more than that. So how do we do that, right? How do we get data into these managed tables? So in Power BI world, remember, we really just had import or direct query. But now in Fabric world, we have a lot more choices. So whatever you're comfortable with really is the thing that you can do. So I'm going to go back out to the workspace. So the first option, if I'm coming from a Power BI land and I like Power Query, the first thing that I can try is I could make a data flow gen 2. So this is just like Power Query. So of course, in this scenario, I have created a sample one, and we'll just take a look at it. So if we click in here, then you can see that things are very, very similar to what we're used to in Power BI. It's just Power Query. Again, I have Paul to thank for teaching me all this. Thank you, Paul. But this is just some Power Query. So what I'm doing here is I'm pulling some data from Lakehouse contents. So I'm just saying, go out to this Lakehouse and get me some files. I'm doing a little bit of transformation in here. We don't need to go into the details of this, but comfortable Power Query land. So whenever I get it to the last step, the final important thing that I want to show you in here, and this is huge, this is different than importing in Power Query, is now we have this data destination. So before, we could just import into a Power BI data set or a data flow. Now we can say, okay, take this data and put it into a warehouse or a lake house, or I think we have a couple other options too, but in my case, I wanted to put it into my lakehouse tables. So let's just look at the settings here. It's all very easy. Just drag and drop, clicking around. I'm saying I want to go to this lake house, go to a lake house. And if I just click through, I get the options of what lake houses are available to me. And I've already selected, I want it to go into my rides lake house, into this table. And then finally, the other big thing is that I don't have to overwrite the data. So in an import situation where I'm not doing incremental refresh or partitioning, I'm always replacing my entire data set. But here I have an option. I can either replace my entire data set or I can just append new data. So this is kind of magical if you are used to trying to figure out complicated incremental refresh, custom partitions. Now you can just say, actually, just append my new data. I know that I'm not going to have duplicates. Just go ahead and append it right on top. So to me, this is kind of a huge improvement. It really simplifies things because I can now just add new data to the data that's in my lakehouse. So this is one option for how I can put data into my lakehouse. But I also want to talk about another option. So I'm going to just exit out of here. So another option is just simply a data pipeline. You can copy data. There's a copy activity in a data pipeline. Very simple. If you don't need to do any transformations. But if you do need to do some transformations, you can also use a notebook. This was totally new to me, but those learning paths from Shannon, again, I'm going to plug those because that's how I learned it. Very, very helpful. So I have one here that's called the Process Rides Notebook. And I'm skipping over some steps, but it's all very easy to load data into a notebook from a lake house, for example. But within this one, this is all the entire code that I have. Again, I'm not a Python person, but those learning paths helped me a lot. In this case, all my little code blocks are doing here is, this is the main one. This is saying, get anything that's a CSV from my files in process folder that's type CSV here. So read these CSVs in, and I'm giving it a schema just because I want to be very clear about the data types. But then once I do that, I've now got a data frame. I can transform that data frame with some Python. Like here, I just want to add some new columns. I want to change formats. I want to change the order of my columns a little bit. So now I have this final data frame. So what am I going to do with it? Well, I'm going to put it into a Delta format, into the rides table, and I would like to append. So this is really doing the exact same thing as that Dataflow Gen 2 was doing in Power Query, only this one's doing it in Python. So depending on your preference, you can choose a Dataflow Gen 2, or you can choose a Spark Notebook. I will say the Spark Notebooks are a lot faster. I think, we're hearing rumblings about the Dataflows Gen 2. They should become more performant, but I'm pretty impressed with the speed of the Spark Notebooks. So anyway, so I don't want to just run this manually every time, right? I would like to orchestrate it. So let me just show a couple more things about how to do that. So I'm going to go back out to my workspace. And what I have here is I'm going to filter, because now that I have so many different objects, these filters come in pretty handy. I will filter to a data pipeline. And let's just take a look at this pipeline. I'm also not a data engineer, clearly, because we wouldn't have to hire one out of my salary if I was. But even as a non-data engineer, I can set up a pipeline very, very simply. So this pipeline, all I'm having it do, first step is I'm going to copy whatever files are in the in-process folder. I'm just going to dump them in the to-process folder. Then I'll delete them from to-process. Then I'm just going to run that notebook that I just showed you. And again, I don't have to write any code or anything. Everything's connected. So all I have to do is pick my notebook from a dropdown. It's incredibly simple. And then if I put the wrong type of CSV in there that has all the wrong columns, I might get a failure. So I'll dump that into a failed folder. But if it's successful, I'll have it go into the success folder. So I think we should give it a try. So let's just remind ourselves that within the report before, we were looking at data from July, and we had 3.5 million rows. So now let's add some more data, and let's run that pipeline. We'll cross our fingers and hope for the best. One thing I did not show you yet, we talked about the OneDrive for data. So they really made it just like that. So you can download this thing called I'm blanking on it just because I'm presenting, but the OneLake Windows Explorer, I think. If you download this, then in your Windows Explorer, you'll get this cool little thing that says OneLake, and every workspace that you have access to will pop up in there as a folder. And then within that workspace folder, you'll see everything that's in there, like lake houses or warehouses. So we have that Bike Rides Lake House here. Under there, remember, we had files and tables. So let's look at those. We have the files, and these folders should look pretty similar. They were those subfolders I set up, and tables. So now what I need to do is I need to give it some data to the to-process folder. This is blank right now, but I've got some pre-baked files. So let's take one of those. We'll take June of 2022. And just like I'm in OneDrive, I can just drag it in. So I'm going to move that from temp to process. So there it is now. So now we have June in there. So if we go back to our lake house, now we should see that file in to process. Yep, there it is. So that wasn't there before. I just moved it in the OneLake File Explorer. So now it's there. So now I want to get this data into my rides table. And remember, I've got that cool notebook to do it. So let's go back to the pipeline. And again, we're going to have to do some kind of a sacrifice here because we want this to run successfully. So I'm going to click run. And this will take, I think, as long as everything goes well, it should take about a minute. But of course, you can schedule these things. It doesn't have to be this manual clicking run process, but this is what you can use to orchestrate a data flow Gen 2, a notebook, a copy activity, anything that works best for you. So while this is running, we can talk about how, in this case, I'm having it run a notebook, but of course I could have it run a data flow Gen 2 or do anything else. I could have it send alerts to me. This is a pretty simple pipeline, but you can do a lot more with it than what I'm showing you here. So right now we've got, okay, so now it's saying that it's moved that file to the in process folder. We can go back to the lakehouse and verify. Yep, so to process is blank. So we should see our file in process. Yep, it just moved it over there for us. And now it's going to run that notebook, which is what's going to process the data, transform it a little bit, and put it into the rides table. So let's go back and check on the status of our pipeline. And it's running the notebook. Now here I'm just going to pause and I'm going to mention it does take about a minute. That's because it's starting up this whole Spark session. From what I heard in the olden days, starting up a Spark session in our other tools, it could take minutes. You would start it up, you would go get a cup of coffee, you would hope for the best, you would come back. But within Fabric, now it's within seconds. So yeah, performance is really good with Spark. And yep, so that one now processed the files, and it should now just move that file over to the processed folder. So let's just take a look in the Lakehouse. Yep, so it's gone from in process, and we should now see June. There it is. Okay, thank you, Demo Goddesses. Okay, our run succeeded. So the way we can prove this to ourselves, that we don't have to actually refresh an entire Power BI data set, is we'll just go back to the report. And all I have to do is just refresh my page. And if all is good, then we should see, yep. So now we have our data from June. And we've got 3.8 million rows. So we did not have to do a Power BI data set refresh, and everything is still very, very speedy. Our new data just appears magically. So that is really what I wanted to show on how now within Fabric, we can still do all the things we're comfortable with in Power BI, like Power Query, but we have a lot more tools at our disposal that we can also use.
Can I pause you for a minute?
Yes.
Paul, were there any audible oohs and ahs in the room?
Are
We
there
hope
any
so.
oohs and ahs? Everybody at once. Yes, okay. Any questions? Yeah.
Is it, I mean, you potentially go way over your capacity when you refresh your cards?
All right, so the question is, it would be possible to go over your capacity if you're dealing with a lot of data?
Yes, good question. Okay, so within the documentation, there are some details about limitations, and there are row limits on each capacity. So for example, the trial capacity right now is an F64, which is equivalent to a P1 premium capacity. They have not published the actual row limit, but if you have enough time to experiment, you'll find that the row limit for Direct Lake is in F64, it's somewhere between 1 billion and 2 billion rows before it falls back to Direct Query. So it's not that it won't work, but it's just that if you go over the row limit for the capacity in your Lakehouse table, it will fall back to Direct Query. So that's going to be something that we're going to learn more about in the coming months as the details get published. Is there another question?
I have a question.
Yeah, another question. Go ahead and just lean into the mic here.
While getting the data into Direct Lake, we also heard something about the Z ordering or a V order of data.
wide getting into the data set. So that is for the performance optimizations of the data set itself. Is there something that has to be processed in the notebook, or does the metadata take care of it?
Well, it takes care of it. There are defaults. There are settings that you can tweak yourself. But from what I'm seeing, the recommendation is just to start with the defaults, and it does do the ordering itself for you. But there are some settings that you can tweak also.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Stephanie.
Sure. I just had one more thing I wanted to show demo-wise because my boss made a big deal of it, which is that she wanted our analysts to be able to query with SQL also. So the last thing I just want to show is that whenever you set up a lakehouse, like I showed in the beginning, how you just create a new lakehouse, you get three things. You get the lakehouse itself, and then you'll also see a SQL endpoint created and a default data set. You can use the default data set. You can make some adjustments to it, but you can also create your own data set, which is what I did. However, within the SQL endpoint, I think we're all SQL people here, so we all might like this, but this is automatically created. You do not have to do anything. If you click on the SQL endpoint, it's going to look very comfortable to you, like tables, views, functions, stored procedures, and then you can just write a SQL query against your managed tables. So I've got
Hey,
the rides
Stephanie.
table here. Yes.
You are not fired. This is fabulous.
Thank
This
you,
is
boss.
exactly what we need.
Thank you so much. Okay, good. All right, so I can just run a quick SQL query and I can confirm that I have those 3.8 million rows in my rides table, for example. So that was important to my boss. It's probably important to a lot of us. We want to be able to explore the data that we're using for our reports with more tools than DAX queries. So this is another example of how we can do that. And that is the end of our demo. I just want to point out there's a lot more within Fabric. There are all kinds of tools to help us learn about these new features. So if you're not comfortable with notebooks, don't be scared. I wasn't either. But it's fairly straightforward to start learning how to use the notebooks, for example. So that's the end of the demo. And the last thing that we wanted to talk about a little bit is just how you can get started with Fabric if you haven't yet done that. And Shannon, I'm going to put you on the spot here for resources for that.
Yeah, happily. I am, I've been completely spamming the chat with links, but I'm going to drop the link again for the Fabric Learning Path. It's getting started with Microsoft Fabric, and essentially every module in the Learning Path has an associated hands-on lab. So you do have to spin up your own capacity or use the trial capacity within your organization. If you want to spin up your own capacity, we have a resource for you, and I will drop that in the link as well. But the cool thing about it is the lab walks you through exactly what it is you need to do, and we try to mimic things that you would need to do in the real world. So there are resources out there. It's still super new, and we're working on them. So your feedback is welcome in that regard as well.
Yes. So yes, Fabric community, engaging the community, try Fabric. Also, Shannon did do a post on Data Witches for how you can set up your own private trial if you can't do it through your company. So there's a resource there. And then finally, number 3, there's going to be a big Microsoft Data and AI conference in Vegas in March. So put that on your radar. I'm sure there will be a lot of announcements and great presentations. And so I think we are definitely ready for some questions if there are any more of those. Would love to talk about Fabric. And if not, I
Any other
think you
questions
guys
here
are.
in the room? Are we? Yes. Well, we're don't know if you can hear us. We just suffered some slow connectivity just here in the last minute or so.
Okay.
So we apologize for that. Fantastic presentation. This was, I've been attending the airlift sessions all week, and I have to say that this is probably the most comprehensive presentation that I've personally seen on fabric. So well done.
Thank you, Paul. That means a lot coming from you.
Thank you.
So one more question. Do we know when to expect general availability of fabric?
Well, everybody's asking that. We definitely expect to hear some announcements at Ignite next month, but we don't know the details.
We don't know the details.
Yeah, and we caught most of that, but I'll repeat it, and that is that we are expecting the product to be released circa the Ignite conference. But to your point, we don't have details. That's up to the product team. But Amir Nets is, what's that? Oh, we do have one more question.
So last that I heard kind of a demo on fabric was a few months ago. And at that time, there was a number of features that impressed, particularly our business intelligence team. But one thing that concerned me at the time, or that I wanted to learn more about, but there weren't any answers yet, was the security model that was still being worked out at that time. Is that pretty well firmed up now?
From what I'm hearing, that is a piece that is still being actively worked on. We're not getting a lot of details yet on what the one security is going to look like. But we hear that security assigned into the lake house is going to flow all the way through to reports. So I know it's an important feature that they're working on, but I don't know the details of when we're going to learn more.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and the product team are being equally vague in answering that question. So I think we know that the product, when it's released, the features that they release may be complete, but there's a lot more to come. All right. Well, ladies, thank you very much. We do realize that it's 10:30 on the East Coast, so I appreciate you staying up late presenting for us. Fantastic presentation again. Thank you both.
Thank you too. Thanks so much for having us.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
All right. We need to close up here. All right. I'll turn on my camera and let you two have the floor.
Do a quick sound check, make sure we're not echoing.
Mike, I've had my mic open for quite a while now, and we haven't had problems with feedback or echo.
Okay, all right.
Right.
So yeah, thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Shannon, for the presentation. So 15 in person and quite a few online. This is a very good turnout. I want to let everybody who is in person know that we all do meet at Shanahan's afterwards for kind of a happy hour to socialize and just have a little bit of
Beer.
beer. That's it. I was going to try to find a nicer way to put it, but yeah, that's it. It's beer. And of course, everybody here is more than welcome to join us.
Yeah.
Any other announcements that we need to make before we close it for the year? Oh, I know.
If one of you would like to speak, and I always say this, but we have the opportunity to say, don't just let us know. And we'd love to hear from you. Almost any topic is good. I mean, we do a wide variety. It's not just.
That's great.
It's not just big blindable, it's not just data. We've got all. So come up, like I said, send an email to leadership or something. But it's not if you're interested in doing a presentation. We'll fit into the schedule.
And if you want to start out with 5 or 15 minutes, that's a great way to get.
It's actually hard to-
And he said that, but it just depends on who you are, I think.
Right.
But we don't want to scare anyone away. So if you want to do 5 to 15 minutes and then you get started, you're like, hey, no, I think I can stretch this out an hour. We will let you go now.
Well, the format for the longest time was 30 minutes speaker, and then you go like a half long, 75 minutes speaker, and then when COVID. So now. So let's.
And thank you guys all for a wonderful 2023. You know, we all survived through COVID. We all made it through our first full year of back to in-person. So I'm going to thank the community here for supporting us and for showing up and for just, you know, taking the time out of your evening, out of your week to be here with us.
And also, thank you, as we're still working through some of the technical details and working in this room that seems to be, seems to continue to challenge us. Thank you for working through that. We're making some progress. Also, hope to improve that.
Well, that's it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That's a big job.
That's it.